Holdenwood says the altcoins I've lying around are from my early days in crypto. Now, 3 years later, I'm running a couple nodes and saving for a BitAxe myself. Now, Bitcoin is the only one for me. Sounds familiar with a lot of people, I think, including myself. I was a dirty altcoiner without even knowing it. But here I am on a show called The Daily Bitcoin Journey, where we talk about Bitcoin and shit on other coins all day. All right, so here's the thing. Somebody asked a question yesterday about cashing in their investments, paying the fees, paying the taxes, selling it all for Bitcoin. And I said when I first got into Bitcoin, I kind of want to start with this. We just talked about my altcoin phase here, but this is kind of how I got into Bitcoin and what I did. For the first little while, probably for the first year and a half, I was still working. I mean, at a 9-to-5 job. I was an accountant, a CPA. And I had a lot of free cash flow at the time. So I was dumping a lot of this into altcoins, and I was just kind of using my job as a way to buy more altcoins. There's a couple that I was buying a lot of, but then I kind of discovered Bitcoin. And somewhere between there, I left my job and did go all in on Bitcoin. Like I'm talking all in very early on. And that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because I do honestly regret doing that. I do. Because it's not something that you should be doing. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I didn't have anybody who knew better than that. I just discovered this thing called Bitcoin. I saw the power of it. I saw where the future was going. And I just thought, I have to be in this. All of it. I have to be all in on this thing today, not tomorrow, not next week, not a month from now. I need to do this full time, and I need to take everything I have and buy Bitcoin with it. And I did. And it was fucking stupid. It really was. I mean, the fact that it was bad timing in the sense that the price was very high. It was running up. I was buying on the way up. Left my job. I sold my rental house. I sold a lot of my investments. I cashed out my pension, bought Bitcoin. And the shitty thing about that, I mean, in a perfect world, I would still have that Bitcoin. But the problem is there's no such thing as that. And the thing about Bitcoin is you have to put in the work. You have to put in the time. You have to understand how much is a good amount to have, how much free cash flow you have, the fact that the price will probably go down again sometime within the next couple of years, and you have to be prepared for that. Because the Bitcoin that I bought on the way up, I was forced to sell on the way down. Because I saw this asset as something that was going to keep going up and up and up, and I couldn't lose. Why wouldn't I put everything that I have into Bitcoin? It just keeps going up. Last month it was 10,000. This month it's 20,000. Next month it's probably going to be 40,000, and it was. And when you're in that, when you're seeing something like that firsthand that you've never experienced before, it's very easy to just dive in fully. And so I paid off the taxes. I paid off the fees, and I took whatever I had left and I put into Bitcoin. And yeah, if I still had all that Bitcoin today, I would be in a much different spot than I am today. But that's not the reality. I had to sell a lot of it just to be able to stay solvent. And I don't think that's a position that you ever want to get into. So kind of what I'm going to talk about here in terms of how much you should allocate to Bitcoin, it really depends on what age you're at. And so one thing I would say is if you are somebody, I'm going to do like 3 different age categories here, and kind of like without a spreadsheet today. I was going to have a spreadsheet, but without a spreadsheet, I'm just going to kind of talk through it. And so one thing I would say is that if you are somebody who's young, let's go with like under 30 for the first example here, under 30. I would say you should be all in on Bitcoin. And I think at that point, you're either saving for like a car or a house or something. And the one thing I would say to that is don't do that right now. The prices of everything are so inflated, and we're heading into the greatest bull run of all time within the next 6 or 12 months. So, and that's like what's the best case here. Best case, we get a good president in there who's friendly to Bitcoin. It rips up 2, 3x, 4x. You can start either selling some of that Bitcoin or just paying off your loans. So this is what I would suggest for anybody who's like 30 and under. Take whatever money you've saved up through the years. Instead of putting it into a car down payment, instead of putting it into a house down payment, just buy some Bitcoin. Find a way to buy some Bitcoin and hold on to it. Know that you're going to have that for probably at least 1 or 2 years, and you're going to have to be patient. But you're going to learn a lot of good lessons by being patient, and it's going to significantly pay off for you. So let's just use a car for an example. Let's say you got $5,000 down to put towards a new car. And instead of doing that, you actually buy Bitcoin. And historically, the last couple bull runs, we've gone what? 10x? So you got $5,000 today that you've worked hard, you've collected beer cans, you've mowed lawns, you got $5,000. You buy Bitcoin, we get through this next cycle. At the end of it, instead of selling the Bitcoin, just take a loan against it or take a car loan. I don't think you really have to put up too much collateral there to get a car loan. And then just instead of selling your Bitcoin to buy a car, just every month shave off a portion of your Bitcoin to make the loan payment on it. And then whatever you're working for, your job or whatever you're doing, you can just use that to fund the rest of your life. But for your car payment specifically, you can just shave off a portion of that Bitcoin and pay your car loan every month. I wouldn't buy it today, hold on to it for 2 years and then sell it, because you're always going to regret selling that Bitcoin. Exact same thing for somebody who's in 30. And the last thing there, if you're under 30, is that just be aware of the fact that you have pretty much the rest of your life if something were to go wrong, and things can go wrong. That's why I wanted to start with the story. And I've never really talked about that before on here, of how fast I went into Bitcoin and how badly I got burned by it. So you get into it, and let's say that Bitcoin does, let's say Kamala Harris's wins another election, and she bans Bitcoin in the US, and the price goes down to $10,000, and all of a sudden your $5,000 went to $1,000 worth. That's okay. You're 25 years old. You have the rest of your life to be able to make that back. You can always make more money. And if you're not forced to sell it and you hold on for another couple of years, you're probably going to be in a much better position where you are. But just keep that in mind. If you are somebody who's young, you're never going to get anywhere in life saving in fiat right now. Saving in fiat, earning in fiat, it's going to get you nowhere. And the earlier you can realize that, the better off your life's going to be. So that's for the young people here. I'd say for people who are 30 to 50, you can kind of find some sort of balance there in terms of how much you should be keeping in Bitcoin, how much you should be taking from your pension, your retirement funds, because you don't really have that when you're 20. What was that? I think there was just a fox in the yard. But you don't really have that when you're 20. And that's something that when you're 30 to 50, you're probably deep into your career right now. And the financial aspect is one part, but you should also be, I think that this is the time where if you're 30 to 50, you should strongly look at doing something outside of the fiat system. And I'm not saying like you have to drop everything you're doing, quit your job, take up a new career, start a new business, only accept Bitcoin. Like, that's not what I'm saying here. But you have to be actively taking steps from that life towards a different standard. And part of that would be leaving your job eventually, starting your own business, doing contract work, doing things online, learning how to sell things online, whatever it is that you do, your product, your service, becoming very good at that, because we're moving into a different economy here. It's going to be very global and not run by globalists, but very globally connected with Bitcoin. And so you want to set yourself up to be able to sell products and services to anybody on earth for Bitcoin. That's your kind of end goal there. But you have to take actionable steps to get there. And so that's what I would say is just take a look at your portfolio. And again, there's a chance that Kamala Harris wins this election, wins. And I think that there's a lot of Bitcoiners and there's a lot of people. I saw Van Eck said that Kamala would somehow be good for Bitcoin. I almost threw up when I saw that. Just understand how bad Kamala Harris would be for Bitcoin. We know that there's nothing that they can do to stop Bitcoin, but they can make our lives absolute hell here. Let's say that Kamala Harris gets into the White House. And you've seen, this isn't my opinion on anything, you've seen how they've treated Bitcoiners and cryptocurrency people in the last 4 years. Let's say that they go after every single exchange. They say that you cannot hold your own Bitcoin. You have to KYC it. Otherwise, if you get caught transacting in Bitcoin, 25 years in prison for America. So if you're an American and you're invested in Bitcoin, you're using Bitcoin, you're building in Bitcoin, and all of a sudden Kamala Harris comes out and said, if you're caught using Bitcoin or sending Bitcoin, 25 years in prison. And is that, what do you say? Is that constitutional? No, absolutely not. But by the time, it's just like COVID, they made all these different restrictions, these different laws they made up, which are not allowed to happen. But in that moment, people are very scared. Very scared. They don't want to spend 25 years in prison, even though it's a fake law that will be overturned later by the courts. They see that as a very scary thing, and they either sell Bitcoin or they stop using it, and it goes down and down and down. So if you're somebody who's like 30 to 50, you have a family you need to support, like it probably isn't the best idea to be all in on Bitcoin right now, truly. Because of that, it could easily happen. And although that wouldn't stop Bitcoin, I mean, the Kingdom of Bhutan would still keep mining Bitcoin. El Salvador would still be using a volcano to mine Bitcoin. Russia will still be buying Bitcoin. But for the US, they could make your life absolute hell. And people, I think, are missing that. They think that Kamala Harris, for some reason, she'd get in, start printing a bunch of money, and that would and basically continue their outlaw of digital assets, of crypto, of Bitcoin. And somehow that would be a good thing for Bitcoin, maybe long term. Maybe in 20 years, it might be a good thing. But the short term repercussions of that would be a fucking nightmare. And when the US citizens are scared to hold Bitcoin and move Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin is going to take an absolute nosedive. So just understand that could happen. And all these things that you're reading about Kamala Harris getting in somehow good for Bitcoin is complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. So that's 30 to 50. I would say be responsible with it. Focus more on moving your time and your energy from that system into Bitcoin. You could still have some, GICs. You could still have some Tesla stock. You could still have some whatever people hold nowadays. I don't even know. But just be aware that could happen. And the last position you want to be in is a place where you have to sell some of your Bitcoin to pay for your whatever, or sell it because you took a loan against it, and all of a sudden you got a margin call on it. And they said, you know what? Bitcoin price went down 90% overnight because Kamala Harris banned it. You have to pay this back. We're taking your other assets. That's not a position you want to be when you're just starting a family or have young children. Very scary spot. So I kind of wanted to accomplish two things, just to make people realize how bad Kamala Harris could be in Bitcoin. And the crazy thing to me is, like, Trump's been on the exact opposite spectrum of that. He's literally been going to Bitcoin conferences, meeting with Bitcoin mining companies. He's doing all of these things that should, in a normal world with normal functioning brains, should signal this is our best option by far. But for some reason, the Trump derangement syndrome is real, and people somehow believe that Kamala Harris could be a good thing for Bitcoin. Last part here, 50 to 150. I don't want to discriminate against any ages here, so we're going 50 to 150. I would say that at this part of your life, it might not be the best idea to be all in on Bitcoin at all, not even close to that. Because you've worked your whole life. You've accrued all of this capital by working. Let's use my friend's dad. Let's say he worked for the city for 40 years. He's got a very good pension. He doesn't have to worry about money anymore. He's looking into Bitcoin, but he's not sure really how much to put into there. I would say be fairly cautious of that. And if you're somebody who's going to need that money over the next 10 years, I probably wouldn't be putting it into Bitcoin, truthfully. Because if something like that were to happen, and all of a sudden you work for 60 years and you put it into Bitcoin and it crashed because Kamala Harris got into the White House, and now you have nothing, you have to go back to work, or you have to sell your house and rent now because you went too far into Bitcoin. I know that there's not a whole lot of people that would even consider that. But kind of the point of this is just to show that depending on what stage of your life you're in, that's how much you should be not risk, because risk isn't the right word. How much short-term liquidity you're going to need. Let's just say that. And how much of a chance you have to recuperate in case something were to happen to Bitcoin. When you're young, you could lose it all tomorrow and start again. And in 40 years from now, you probably wouldn't even remember that happened. If you're 50, 60, 70, 80, and all of a sudden a significant of your wealth that you had in Bitcoin went down 90%, that's going to be very hard to recuperate at that point. Very hard to recuperate. So if you're in that age category, and if you have enough, you're good for, you can sell some of your Apple shares, and you just want to keep Bitcoin for more like your legacy for your family that you're going to pass on. I see it very similar to like farmland in that age. Like that's the legacy you're wanting to leave behind. But at the same time, you have to make damn sure that Bitcoin is protected. Because with land, you don't have to worry about self-custodying your land. You don't actually own the land, but you don't have to take on that responsibility of self-custodying, of multi-signature setups, of multi-jurisdictional, to make sure that when you do pass that on, and I'm not saying 50-year-olds are going to be dying, or 60 or 70-year-olds, or even 80-year-olds, but it's definitely much more of a chance at that time. And kind of on that note, let's maybe end with this. And I hope that makes sense to people. I haven't really been looking at the comments here because I was pretty focused on trying to get words out of my mouth there. But there was one of my somebody I knew fairly well. He helped me with a lot of things with King Golf. He was one of our suppliers for different things. He was actually at the wedding in Italy that we went to a couple months ago. And I just learned yesterday that he passed away. He was probably 60 years old, had a heart attack. Say what you want about that. I'm not going to speculate on it. But it just goes to show that anytime, never in a million years would I have opened my phone up and thought that I was going to see that news. Never. But shit happens, and there's going to be a lot of shit that happens over these next couple of years. So regardless of what age you are, regardless of how much Bitcoin you have, part of that should be your legacy. Part of that should be passing it on, not only to your kids, but your community and the people that you care about, the people who have helped you get to where you are today. That's a legacy you want to leave behind. And the last thing you want to do is have that legacy on a fucking ledger, on a keychain, and hope that everything just works out for you. Nothing could go wrong there. Just hope that can't happen to me. So again, regardless of where you are, regardless of how much Bitcoin you have, your number one priority of all that should be making sure that Bitcoin's safe. Because at the end of it, people are obviously going to have their memories with you and stuff. But the only thing I think that's going to be around in 100 years from now is the Bitcoin that you have today. So just protect it. Take actionable steps to protect it, whether you have to invest some money, whether you have to invest some time, but make sure you invest some of your energy into keeping that Bitcoin safe. All right, I'm going to look at a few comments here. I see, I need to top this up. My least favorite part about Zap.stream is when I have to top up my stream for more than the zaps that have come in today. That's the most painful part, but it usually evens out. So I'm not going to complain about that. But I want to say thank you to Bitcoin and Clyde, who zapped 420 sats and doubled the pot for today. Stack sats like a motherfucker. Amen. Amen. Thank you for that. Appreciate those. We're going to check on some comments here. I'm going to stay on for about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to move to part 2 of the show today. And Arnie just showed up for part 2. Arnie's kind of at the point now where he knows when I'm calling him to mess with him and when I'm calling him because I actually need him. He ignores me a lot now. Bugger.